Weirding Way Media.
Welcome to episode 133 of the Filmumentaries Podcast. This is Jamie Benning, your host and sole creator of this podcast. This episode is arriving a couple of days later than planned, thanks to some hiccups, but I promise it's worth the wait. This week I'm joined by Tommy Williamson, visual effects artist, maker of things, and all-round creative force. Tommy worked on an incredible range of projects over the years, from Spider-Man 2 to Sin City, Pan's Labyrinth, The Mist, and most recently Dune Prophecy. He's one of those people that has managed to bridge the gap between practical effects and digital wizardry, and his passion for making, whether it's movie magic or replica props, it just shines through. We talk about his early love of model making, his first big break on the Blob remake, working with directors like Guillermo del Toro and Frank Darabont, and how his creative drive spills over into his personal projects, from prop replicas to beautifully designed collectible pieces. Tommy also shares insights into the shift from rubber puppets and miniatures to the world of CGI, and how he managed to keep hands in both those worlds throughout his career. Before we get into it, a quick reminder, this podcast is completely independent and only possible thanks to listener support. So if you'd like to help me keep making these episodes, please consider joining my Patreon. It's patreon.com/Jamie Benning. That's JamieBenning. Yes, I'm speaking to you. You know, those people that are out there that have been listening to this for 5 years now. Maybe it's time for you to give back a little bit. It's going to be like the cost of a couple of coffees. But if enough of you do it, then it really makes a huge difference to my ability to continue to make it. If you do sign up, sometimes you get early access, you get video versions occasionally, you get an ad-free version of the podcast as well. And if you haven't already, make sure you also check out the Filmumentaries YouTube channel, where I've been sharing some great behind-the-scenes clips and short videos alongside the podcast, as well as some of my longer-form documentaries recently. Right, so here's my conversation with Tommy Williamson, and I'll be back at the end for a bit more jabbering on. Tommy, when did you first realize you wanted to create things for a living? Was it, like many of us, building stuff as a kid with Legos or Lego, as we say here, you pluralize it over there, or cereal boxes or something? Was there something more elaborate? Did you jump into kind of model making, proper model making?
The earliest stuff I remember doing was probably paper craft. I didn't get a lot of support from my parents as far as the artistic stuff goes. So I wasn't like I could say, I want to sculpt, and they would just buy me some clay. I had to kind of fight for everything. But I found that paper craft, we always had plenty of paper around. My dad had a restaurant in town, and he would print the menus on different colored paper. So if I ever needed some stock, I could just grab a big stack of menus, and I could make anything I wanted. And I got actually pretty good at it. I could build, whatever I needed, just to be able to build it. But I also
what age are we talking about here?
What's that?
And what age are we talking about here?
This was like 6 or 7 years old, somewhere around there, maybe even a little earlier than that. And I also had, plastic model kits. When I could get my hands on one, I was very much into that. Later, it was like anything that I could do that was creative, if I could get my hands. Like, getting modeling clay was actually kind of hard to do. One, I lived in a really small town, and it was even smaller back then. So getting my hands on supplies was always a bit of a challenge. But I found that I could, like Tootsie Roll. Another thing from the restaurant, my dad always had this big bowl of them that you could just grab out of. And I found that Tootsie Roll is actually a pretty good sculpting material. So I would make little things out of Tootsie Roll.
And that kind of sparked your creativity. And what were you sculpting back then? Were you inspired by things you were seeing on TV or anything at the movies at the time?
Yeah, I mean, whatever type of thing I would see. Like back then, it would have been like, Harryhausen type stuff, or But, I mean, I didn't really get truly twisted until I was about 9 years old when Star Wars came out. Then I was absolutely bent from then on. Two things happened when I was 9. I went to Universal Studios with my family, and Star Wars came out. And that was like all the ammunition that the universe needed to warp me for life.
It's amazing, isn't it, to think you were at that sort of perfect prime age for the intended audience. I mean, 9 years old. I mean, I was 7 when I saw Return of the Jedi. I was 4.5 when I saw Empire. But it wasn't until Jedi that I sort of realised people make movies. Did you have a sense of that then, that those movies were made, or were you just enjoying them for what they were?
I don't remember when I ever made the kind of the flip. There's always that thing that people talk about where they were like, oh, wait a minute, movies are a thing. People get paid to do that. I remember kind of slowly working that out. It wasn't until we went to Universal where I kind of got a taste of what behind the scenes really looked like or felt like. And there wasn't much. They were shooting a couple things like on the back lot. We drove past it and I could see kind of what was going on. And they had a couple of the things set up with the big hot set thing on there. It was just, completely fabricated. But I became really, really fascinated with just the whole machinations and how all the people it takes to make it, and all the stuff you need to make it, and the whole creative process all the way through. Absolutely fascinated with it.
Yeah, it's just, there's something about that period, isn't there, that has opened up so many people's minds, I think. Just like films like, just that same year, Close Encounters arriving, and Saturday morning cartoons and all those things, I'm sure inspired you as well.
Another stuff that I shouldn't have been privy to, like The Exorcist and Jaws. I shouldn't have been able to see that stuff when I was that young, but I somehow managed. And yeah, The Exorcist was really scary, but also Dick Smith was in it, did the effects for it. I was really fascinated with makeup too. In fact, that first trip to Universal, they used to have a thing where they would sit down. They'd pull a couple people from the audience and they would sit them down in the front. They may have been plants, I'm not sure. But they would make them up as Frankenstein's monster and the Bride of Frankenstein, and while they just talked about the history of makeup. And the rest of the family got completely bored with it. We were like 10 minutes into it. I was not going anywhere. They were like, come on, let's go. And I was just like, go. I stayed for the whole thing. I was absolutely fascinated. So that was another early obsession with mine, was makeup and makeup effects. In fact, that's what I started doing professionally before I moved into the digital side of things.
Yeah. Was there a point in your childhood, though, where your parents kind of acknowledged that potentially this could be something on your horizon rather than just a fad?
No, I mean, they kind of figured out early on that I was serious about it as far as time dedicated to it. It wasn't just, I mean, I loved the stuff. I loved making things. Like, I constantly make things. I have to make things. It's absolutely in my DNA. Their acknowledgement of how much I was actually doing that stuff and taking it seriously. It wasn't like, why don't you go outside? They understood, okay, he's not interested in baseball or football. He wants to create things. But the ambition of working on movies, which is really where I went from age 9 on, it was never really taken seriously by them, especially my mom, who was just not interested in supporting that at all. I was supposed to go to college and just be an upright citizen, and the art thing, and it was never serious. So I always had to really, really fight those battles. And my dad was artistic himself. He would give me more leeway. In fact, he encouraged me a lot. It was never like it was taken seriously, but he knew that I was creatively motivated. And like when he was a restaurateur. He started a restaurant here in town, a deli, with his brother, and they wanted to redo the front of the building. And so he just laid down the architectural drawings that he got from the city for the building and said, design the front for me. That was like 7 years old. How do you...
No way.
for his next restaurant, or close to the next restaurant, there's a burger joint here in town. It's still open, called Tom's, named after his favorite son, I'd like to think. I designed the logo for it because he wanted to make it. It was home of the educated burger. We had 27 burgers on the menu, and it was A through Z. Still do it there. Still fantastic. If you're ever in Lompoc, California, Tom's Burgers. It's really delicious.
Tom's Burgers, yeah.
I designed the logo for that, and it's still in use. In fact, they kept the original window from the restaurant. They moved it to the new restaurant and kind of put it inside as like an entryway. It's still there. I was probably 9 when that was designed. So, I mean, my dad was always there to say, to acknowledge that creativity and the things that I could make had value, but it was also never encouraged like that was a career path. Never to be, a fun thing to do, but not a serious thing to do.
Yeah. But being so young and having something that you created out in the world must have been a pretty big thing, because most kids of that age, when they're creating things, like here we'd have VFX models and things like that and Tamiya models, you sort of do that stuff like behind closed doors, but to have stuff out in front of people, that must have been pretty cool for you.
It is pretty cool. A lot of people didn't believe me. I go, I designed that logo, and they were like, oh yeah, right. No, really? Or talk about the front of the building. My dad let me lay this out. And he's like, oh, no, okay. Or they would just look at it and go, well, that's neat, and just kind of blow it off. Since then, it's
go on.
I had an epiphany when I was on a plane once that the likelihood that everyone on that plane had seen something that I had done or had a hand in was very high. Maybe 100%. It was a domestic flight, and there were 120, 130 of us on board, and I realized that everybody here has probably seen something I've done. How cool is that?
Huh.
How cool is that? In fact, I tested it. Cool. I did a speech or a talk at a Lego convention. I'm also big into Lego. And I did an experiment where I had everybody put their hands up. And I just was listing off some titles from things I'd done. I wanted to get to 100%. And I got down to one person who hadn't seen anything. And I was like, okay, well, I gave up. I thought I had it. And then like maybe 15 minutes later, in an offhand, I talked about working on the Barney movie, and he was like, I've seen that. And we were like, oh, the place exploded. I had 100%, everybody in the room. And there was a good crowd in there.
That's pretty amazing to have had that impact on people. And sometimes, design things, people consume them. They don't necessarily, they couldn't sit down and draw the logo that they've seen or, talk about what the work that went into something. But those things sort of permeate us, don't they? They sort of, there's a sort of collective, what's the phrase I'm looking for? There's a cumulative effect to that stuff. I think after a while you realize just how much you know. I mean, we've all played some of those games where you have to name the logo or name the catchphrase or whatever it is. So yeah, to have an audience like that and to get to that 100%, that must have been very cool. You mentioned though your dad was a creative guy, and in your book that you kindly sent me, you said that you had sort of lots of memorable moments with your father, who was a bit of a jokester and would kind of sounds like he sort of planted these creative seeds in your head, kind of making up stories about things that were scientific, for instance, or, creating some skepticism within you. Yeah,
I would say that. There was definitely... My dad he was a character. He was bigger than life. Everybody loved him. Walk in the room, he was the focus of attention. He was boisterous and loud and very funny. I might take after him for my sense of humor, but I'm definitely more on the shy side of things. He was not shy.
Right.
But he had a tendency to kind of to get things wrong. I think I put him a couple in the book. I'm trying to remember. I've been writing that book for a while. Thanks. You actually read it?
Oh, yeah, I did. There was the one about the spray, the silver spray paint.
Oh, yes. He was well intentioned, but yeah, that was a disaster. Yeah, I can't remember what the project was. I think it was a science fair at school. But we had to make like displays, or it was like a book report or something. But I remember I had like a UFO attack, and there were like 3 decent sized UFOs. Good podcast material while I make gestures to the screen. They were about a foot in diameter. And I had been able to work out how to make them. I put a dowel through them. I was spinning them, and I had sanded them so they were nice and smooth and cool looking. And I built a terrain. I had grass on it, a little barn, a little car. And I wanted, there were UFOs. They should be silver, bright silver. And at first I tried, I think, putting foil on them, and it just didn't work. It looked terrible. So my dad was like, well, just spray them. Spray paint them silver. It's like, okay. So, and I wasn't allowed to use the spray paint for, obvious reasons. I was a kid. This is like 8 years old, something like that. Maybe a little older. And he grabbed the silver spray paint off of the top shelf and gave it, eat it. It takes it away.
Mm-hmm.
You know that the scene in Aliens when the floor is melting from the acid blood? That's just solvent on styrofoam. That's the exact result of it.
Right?
So I watched in horror as it started crinkling up and dripping and dissolving. And he was already spray painting the second one. And I was like, Dad, 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 Dad. And we both just stopped and watched it. And it started dripping silver splots. So now my UFO's ruined and the ground is ruined. And I was in horror. And then my dad just kind of went, oh, well, that's something, isn't it? And I started crying and went off to my room. He went off to the bar, I think.
But those they're sort of formative experiences, aren't they? Those to sort of handle those creative disasters, because your job, which we'll talk about your transition to the job in a moment, but being able to handle those moments and being able to adapt and problem solve. Did you go back and rebuild the UFOs, or was it on to the next project?
I did a full rebuild on it. I had to.
There you go.
To clean up. I mean, the UFOs, they melted and then they slid down the bar and then continued to melt. So it would only go so far. So they were like these big crinkly glumps that I was able to pull off of it. And the ground was just that flocking that you use for model railroads. I was able to get some of that. So I was just able to put some more glue down and go right on top of that stuff, put more flocking on it, and it looked okay. And I rebuilt the UFOs, and I used silver acrylic paint that my mom got, which normally getting paint was a pretty big deal. They wouldn't give it to me, but had my dad not completely destroyed my thing, they probably wouldn't have been able to do that. But she felt bad for me and was able to hook me up. And after that, they looked pretty bad. I mean, this also a thing built by a little kid. So
yeah,
and I'm sure in my head it looked a lot cooler than if I saw a picture of it now and be like, oh. Yeah, I sort of did that, didn't I?
There is something about that, though, isn't it, that sparks the imagination, because, real toys that are produced by toy companies that you get for gifts at Christmas or birthday, I always found, apart from my Star Wars figures, probably, I always found they were slightly disappointing, like, because you'd see the TV commercial or you see the advert in the catalogue, and then when you get the toy, you're kind of like, it's already done. Like, what do I do with this? At least with the Star Wars toys, I could sort of recreate the films or whatever. And you had that disappointment of, was it 100 toy soldiers or something you ordered from a comic book?
Yeah, we've all seen that thing in the back of the comic books. I mean, if you're an old codger like me, back then in the back of comic books, there was all kinds of, all the way through the comic books actually, but there was advertisements for stuff that you can get, like X-ray specs.
Yeah, I remember those. Yeah. Just
a whole bunch of stuff. And there was a full page ad for like 100 soldiers in a locker. It was a locker. I think it was Foot Locker it's called. And it was like $1.69. I was like 6. This is mid 70s. And that was a betrayal to everything that is toys. I got the box and was like, it was like, I don't know, 6 inches across or something. I was like, no, this can't be right. What is this? Popped it open, and true to their word, there were 100 things in there. But these soldiers, I'm sure you can find a YouTube video or some photo reference on there. They were like a millimeter thick with these little base on them. They were just thick enough to be not transparent. The plastic, and it had this like really crappy plastic, so it was all swirly. And I was just like, oh, and then the sculpts on them were terrible. They were all out of proportion. It was like, what is this? I set the whole thing up, kind of like got the whole thing out there because I was curious, is there 100 pieces? Sure enough, there were 100 pieces, and nothing was in scale. Even the people, some of the soldiers were bigger than they should have been versus the other ones. And then there were waves, which apparently was I don't know what the female rank is of that. They were called waves on the set, and I didn't know anything about it. But there were girls in the set, and I was like, what is this? I ordered Army men. There were girls in the set, and then there were vehicles in there too, but they were also just terrible. There was a airplane, and I think there was some boats in there, and they were just as thin. They were like theater flats. You put them in the background maybe. But I had grown up with the classic Army men. You'd get in a big bag of them. In fact, we used to set up like battles. We'd set up Army. We had like the green and the tan. We'd set them up on either side, and me and my brother would take turns knocking them down with rubber bands. And that was, how you play war. You can get some guys taking out the gunners who were laying down on their bellies was always difficult. But that was war. So to be able to get 100 soldiers, oh man, I'd have the biggest army. And no, it was terrible.
But another important life lesson about value and expectation mixed with the lesson with the UFOs where you had to sort of adapt and handle these creative disasters. It set you up for the...
What that will do to your... that pain will wreck anything made out of that material. Material interaction has always been... I think I was cued into that day, and it's always been kind of very in front of my mind when I'm actually making things, is what's going to work with what. And that's like an early lesson that kind of pounded that home in a big, really influential way.
Yeah. And with the toy soldiers, I'm sure in the back of your mind somewhere, it's inspiring you to make sure your work is of a standard that you would accept and hold a high standard. But so we're now sort of talking in your early years, but then what was the sort of transition where you kind of thought, right, this is something I'm going to pursue? Was this via things like Famous Monsters of Movie Land, magazines like that? Was it sort of doing Starlog? Yeah. And then you felt like there was potentially a place for you in that world?
I actually, because I grew up in Lompoc, even getting a copy of Starlog was kind of a novel thing. Back then, I was able to put my hands on a few issues every once in a while when we go someplace else. Phantasmic, I think, was another one. No, what's that?
Phantasmagoria.
There was Famous Monsters, Starlog, and Fangoria was a big... Finding that for the first time was actually kind of a watershed moment. I was like, whoa, and I got to read about all the materials and see behind-the-scenes pictures and stuff like that. So I was always fascinated. I never really knew what I wanted to do. I just knew that I wanted to work on movies, to make movie magic. And I wasn't kind of discipline oriented early on. I was a generalist by necessity because I was alone. I could get my friends, I could talk them into helping me every once in a while. But for the most part, I was always an island. I just, here in this town, finding other people doing that stuff was impossible. Long before the internet.
Yeah, many of the people I've spoken to, like people like Ken Ralston and Phil Tippett and Dennis Muir, and they are pretty much sure that all of them were in a situation where they one day picked up the phone and just called an office and said, look, I'm interested in this. Can I come down and check it out? And eventually their faces were sort of recognized and they got in that way. Is that something you did? Did you pursue it in that manner?
Yeah. I mean, breaking into the film industry, it's still hard, but back then it was next to impossible. And Hollywood, quote unquote, is 3 hours south of here. I'm on the central coast of California on the elbow. Just to get down there, my parents would never take me. So I think somewhere around my early teens, I decided that I liked makeup and makeup effects the most of all the stuff I was doing. So I was going to pursue that as a career option. So I would go... There was another local guy that was... wanted a wannabe filmmaker, and he would go down to try and take meetings and he was trying to actually make a real movie, trying to direct. But he was kind enough to let me tag along, and then he would take me around to a couple of the shops. So I would knock on the door or call up all kinds of makeup effects shops. The only place that I ever got kind of quality time was John Beekler's, for which I will be eternally grateful. John Carl was an amazing guy, and all the crew there were all real welcoming. And it was all, back then there was kind of anti-establishment attitude with all the guys. You know, there was a lot of long hair and metal band t-shirts and stuff, and I didn't fit in with those guys very well, but I was of a kindred spirit because I was creative and I really interested in stuff, and I was just a dumb kid who was willing to do anything just if they would not kick me out the door. So I swept floors and I tore off plaster bandages, you know, got pails of water ready, and I would do whatever they would allow me to do, you know, no pay. You know, and eventually every once in a while they would say, you know, you should probably take off. And if I had even had the opportunity to stay for very long, because I was, you know, just down there with a friend to try and meet up with some people. And eventually I moved down to Long Beach and stayed at my cousin's house. And I would just go, finally had a car, and I would go up to the Van Nuys and kind of the creature-centric area. It's more in the valley, not really Hollywood. And John Carl's was one of the places where they would let me actually hang out and actually stay for a while. And I met a guy there. I'm not sure how I met like all the different people they ended up associating with, but I got invited to a bachelor party, first one I'd ever even been to. And while I was there, I saw a familiar face. There were a few other faces. This was James Cummins' house. James Cummins was another effects guy. Can't remember how many people were there, but I saw familiar faces, and every once in a while I would be like, "Oh, hey, you know, I saw you there," and or just trying to, you know, please be my friend. One of the guys there, he asked if I had been able to find any work, and I said no. And he said, "You should call the Blob Shop." And I was like, "What's the Blob Shop?" And apparently they were doing a remake of the Blob. This was 1988. The remake of the Blob, and Lyle Conway was in charge of the whole thing on the Blob side of things, and Tony Gardner was in charge on the creature effects and makeup effects type of side of things. It was all in one big shop, and there had been some sort of upheaval. I don't know what had transpired, but a bunch of guys had left, so they were kind of hurting. So he gave me the number, and I was like, cool. So the next day, or the day after, I think this was like a Saturday night, I called Monday morning, and they were like, yeah, come on in, come talk. So I grabbed my portfolio, which, you know, was crap. It was stuff I just did at home, and went barreling down there, and was actually in Hollywood after years of saying, the people that you're going to work in Hollywood. I'm like, no, nothing happens in Hollywood. My first job was right there in Hollywood and Wilcox. I went in and showed my. I don't think I actually opened my portfolio. I just talked to one of the coordinators there, and it was chaos. There were people walking around talking on all these people, or picking up the phone, talking on people coming in and talking, and the place was like half empty. And it was because of whatever had gone down the week before. So she was like, well, what do you do? I was like, I'm kind of interested in the mechanical stuff. But really, up to that point, I had never considered that I needed to be a specialist, because I always did everything. But one of my favorite parts was mechanizing things. So it's like, she's like, great, you're a mechanic. You start today, and she pointed me to the back of the shot. You answer to Mark Satrakian, who, absolute legend, sends me back there. So without even showing my portfolio or interview or even meeting the actual guy, Lyle Conway, I didn't meet him for 4 days. And then he was gone like 2 weeks later. He had just left the project, and Stuart Ziff came in. And I was working in movies. So it had gone just like kind of tumbled that way, where I had been showing portfolio and making calls for just weeks and weeks and weeks, putting endless miles on my truck, trying to get my foot in the door. And the whole thing happened because I went to a bachelor party and talked to the right guy at the right moment. That's Hollywood's weird that way.
Yeah, but you know, it's being open to those things, isn't it? And just seeing what's going to happen, and eventually the stars align a lot of the time. But I bet that was a hell of a steep learning curve, being thrown into a production that was already in some disarray.
Yeah, it was. Luckily, I mean, I didn't really even know what I was doing. I'd never used proper materials for anything. I mean, it built like mechanical hands and creatures and stuff, but it was always just what I could get my hands on. I mean, luckily in high school, I got a lot of support from the drama teacher. And he is actually he was married to the choral teacher, who also did musicals up at the rival high school. So he would do a play in the spring, then they would do a musical midway through the year, and then I would do another play at the end of the year. And I basically would go to the other school, work there, come back down, and do the other play. So I was working on 3 projects a year, and always he was always encouraging to get me what I needed for it, and then just add a little bit extra. So I was able to mass materials, but it still never amounted to I did that's the first time I was able to get proper foam latex to work on stuff. But before that it was like sheet foam, and I would cut it with scissors and try and make it work, or liquid latex and spray it on. It was all really, really crude. And my mechanics were like, styrene tubes with the little nylon hinges made for model airplanes, and aquarium tubing and fishing line, and just whatever I could do to just kind of cobble it together. I understood the principles of it because I've always been fascinated by mechanics, but actual working materials, and certainly I was never going to get anywhere near a mill or a lathe. I had no experience with those whatsoever, so I was really thrown into the deep end on the Blob. But luckily, Mark was super patient, and the other guys who were working there were also really cool and really patient with me. And I was able to kind of quickly learn, especially since all the stuff was there. He was like, Mark would say, I need a couple tentacles. Well, I had one there that I could study and figure out how to make, or paddles, which was the things we could put under doors and stuff like that. We need a paddle that's long and thin. Okay. But I could look at how it was previously done, or maybe even use some of the materials that were still around, and quickly learn how to do this stuff. So it was a blast working on it. It was long hours, long commute. And then, shooting it was grueling, because we were, the Blob itself was these silk quilts filled with methacel, which is like a food thickener. You ever had a little apple pie, that type of thing? That thick stuff inside? Methacel. So it's like Ghostbusters slime, same stuff. We would make trash cans full of that stuff. We lived in it. And when you shoot, it would just get everywhere. I remember we'd drive home, I'd work 10, 12-hour day shooting, and then we would just be saturated with it, and it would start to peel off and flake. And I remember stopping at, to get something to eat, or stopping at for something to drink, and people just looking at you like, what? I'm sure wherever my car is, my old Beetle, it's still got traces of methacel.
Still some in there.
I ruined at least 2 pairs of shoes. Yeah, it was a mess, an absolute mess.
Wow. How long did you work on that movie? Do you remember?
Oh, probably about 3 or 4 months. It wasn't very long. They were pretty close to, I don't know if they were close to done. Principal photography was mostly done when I got there. The stuff they were doing, we were all doing stuff on the sets or on the stages. But principal photography, I think, was done. So we were probably just in post, and it was probably about 3 months.
Mm. And did that dovetail with the next project? I mean, I hear from a lot of people, of course, once you're in that world and people know you, they want to take you to the next gig because you've got that shorthand with them.
Yep, exactly. I was working with a guy on the Blob shop named Doug Turner, and he went on to work at Bob Short's shop, and he was like, I need a mechanical guy, but I need somebody cheap. Wait a minute, Tom. So he called me up, and I was like, yes, please. So my next job
right place,
was working on
right time, right price. Yeah.
yeah. I was young and inexperienced and cheap. Yeah. So my next gig was, I worked on 2 things. I looked on Little Monsters and something else at Bob Short's. I don't remember what it was. We have a little shop in Marina Del Rey that's not even there anymore. There's an apartment complex where it used to be. Kind of makes me sad. It was right up from where Greg Jean's shop was too. So at lunchtime, I would just go to Greg's and hang out. It's like, you don't understand, you're a legend. He was totally down to earth, totally cool, and he would just let me hang out. So my every lunch period, I would, I'd break, I'd have whatever I had for lunch. I'd probably just go across the street, grab a sandwich or something, but I'd come back and hang out in Greg's shop. I was way more fascinated with that than I was with I made some terrible mechanics for Little Monsters because all Bob had was a drill press and a belt sander. So I was just drilling holes and trying to make things. And it was all like really weird stuff, like eye on a tentacle, eyeball at the end, or trying to, cobble together an eye mechanism. It's all very, very crude, very, very fast.
Yeah, you're sort of talking about a period here, late 80s, early 90s, where we're just on the cusp of computer-generated imagery appearing. If my memory serves, you've got young Sherlock Holmes just having arrived around that time with the stained glass window. Then, of course, we reached Jurassic Park in 93 release at least, but 91, 92, that stuff started to emerge. Were you aware you were on the cusp of this big change?
I was. A friend of mine had really been fascinated with computer graphics, and we dabbled in it ourselves. But it was always, I was like, it's all right. We saw Tron, went, okay, that's interesting, and other things came out. It was, we saw like, what was it? Oh, Lawnmower Man. It's like, oh, okay, this is all wrong. This is not what this is supposed to be. So I never really took it terribly serious beyond like just he had an Atari computer, so we had like quite a good palette, so we could do digital art. So we would kind of take turns one-upping each other doing art with it. So I was well aware of digital imagery, but it always just seemed like kind of this niche thing, Not there were like projects that would come along and be like, oh, that's okay, that's fascinating. I think the first Pixar short, Tin Toy. I think that was there was what was the name of that, Wall-E or something?
I was trying to remember. There's also Luxor Junior, wasn't there? The little angle poise lamp, and
that was when it first became really evident that okay, this is a burgeoning creative tool that could be something, but it also seemed like it was really, really difficult, really, really slow, and it's going to be a long time before anything really comes of it. So Jurassic Park sort of pulled the carpet out from a lot of people, myself included, when I saw it and just went, oh, okay, that's where this is going. I'm actually interested before that because my friend got an Amiga computer and was showing me some of the stuff that you could do with that, and I was like, oh, that's fascinating. So I got one and became really fascinated with just more of the hard surface modeling stuff. So I built like Star Wars models and fly them around. You could do that really easily, and it was slowly getting better. But the shift that happened when Jurassic Park opened, we all just went, oh, okay, I get it. I became more serious and kind of switching over. It's the same thing at that same time. I was also getting really sick because the creature effects industry was a really toxic. It still is a really toxic thing if you're not careful. So, and the first time I really had to take it seriously, I was working at RoboShop, the landmark RoboShop on the Ghostbusters attraction for Universal. And I was just kind of feeling worse every day. And I finally went to the doctors. I had this uncontrollable cough and was really feeling terrible. And he was like, you need to stop. You need to get out of what you're doing. So and I look back at it now, and there were guys like, they were making these huge molds. I mean, like, the size of cars or buses, these gigantic molds. And they were just mixing Cadasil and resin right there. They had like drapes up, but they were just plastic, things hanging from the ceiling. So we were all just kind of bathing in it all day long. And then through the years, I would work at some place and it was get a lot better. Work at another place, get a little worse. And then finally, I can't remember what project I was working on where it just came to a head. Might have been Power Rangers, where I finally went to the doctor and he's, I was coughing again. And he said, yeah, how old are you? And I was like, 25. He said, you want to be 35? I said, yeah. He said, stop what you're doing, move out of LA. Because I still have a cough. I've probably coughed a couple times. I don't even notice it anymore. But I was damaging myself to a point where I just needed to not do that anymore. So that's when we moved out of LA back up to the Central Coast. And that's when I switched to digital. Because computers don't make your lungs go bad.
No, true. And what was the first gig you landed on that? Because that must have been like walking into uncharted territory again in many ways.
Well, I'd been training myself at home quite a bit. I became pretty fascinated with it, and the Amiga computer was kind of a real special thing. It had a really tight community and real kind of this underground energy flowing with it, especially with the video toaster and Lightwave. So, and my soon-to-be mother-in-law, that was my living with my girlfriend at the time. She was now my wife. She sent an article to us in the mail, and I opened it up, and it was like these guys locally had opened up a computer graphics house, and I saw in the picture that they were using Amigas, and I was like, ooh, okay. So we planned to get the hell out of LA anyway, so called them up. I was like, I'm working in the movie industry, but I need to get out. And you guys want to work on movies? And they were like, you think we can? I was like, yeah, I'm sure of it. But, we came up and we started just doing local advertisements. And that's pretty much all we did. So doing stuff for Foster's Freeze, the stakes were far, far lower than working on feature films. And it was about a year before an old connection that I kept in touch with, Tom Murnoni, was having trouble getting some stuff done for one of his films, Lord of Illusions. And we were looking to get our foot in the door as far as the digital effects for film goes. So we got 3 shots on Lord of Illusions, all not terribly. I mean, I could do all 3 of those shots over lunch now. I mean, it was, but for us, it was like critical. And this was also very early in the digital side of things. So we were using exabyte tape. They were scanning stuff. I think when we first started, it was all still 8-bit. And, the files were, I think they were 2K. And that was still like 2048 by 1556. Oh my God, that's gigantic. These were the VGA days. Yeah. So, but we as hard as it was to get it all done, we managed to get these 3 shots, and that's always that one job leads to the next. So that's how we ended up working on Star Kid, which we worked on. It was called Warrior of Waverly Street at the time, and we ended up like one of the primary vendors on that one. It's all still small time, still pretty simple stuff, not terribly ambitious, but a lot of fun. And this was very, very early days, and to get like a major chunk of this, it's low budget film, but still a film. So to get a huge chunk of that was really, really big deal.
Yeah. And were you still sort of keeping half an eye on the rest of the industry, reading Cinefex and things like that to kind of see what was going on elsewhere? Yeah.
Yep. And I was actually watching the morph of effects happen. It's well documented in Cinefex. I've got my collection in the top of my closet. And you can watch the before period, and then just around the time Jurassic Park happens, the pictures started turning into what they are now, which is basically a guy sitting in a computer and another guy behind him with a cup. That's like all you see now. Or they're pointing at the screen. You know, a little bit more of the practical stuff has been kind of resurfacing recently, and I like to see that. But it's always been my philosophy that, well, I have a saying, the effect takes the means. Whereas the effect itself, what you're trying to accomplish, what you're trying to put on film, it has a logical solution, what it should be. So if it means you build it in miniature and you blow it up, that's the way to do it. If it means, you hire a team of guys to do the effects animation and you simulate water and fire and all that stuff, that's what you do. It's whatever the shot itself, it kind of tells you the most logical way to do that, and that's just the way it should be done. So to watch everything went digital very fast, super fast, and most people weren't really ready for it. There was a lot of carnage in the industry at that point, and we were kind of well suited to kind of slip into where this need suddenly arose. It certainly wasn't easy. I remember we were working on, I think it was Lord of Illusions. I was sitting in Clive Barker's living room and having a conversation with him, trying to convince him that we could do a photoreal bottomless pit. There's supposed to be a camera flying through a pit at the end of the movie. I can't remember what happens, and it took a lot of convincing, and then eventually he was like, okay, well maybe, but they ended up doing it practical anyway. And when you're doing a practical thing like that, you've got to build this big model of a tunnel. You've got to somehow send a camera through it, so you've got like hatches you got to pull off, or you need to put it on a long boom arm. How are you going to light it? You have to leave cavities for lights to get into that. None of that's a problem when you do it digitally. But convincing people to use those evil computers, because everyone had seen Lawnmower Man and Last Starfighter and kind of went, oh, that's cute. But, it's not something to be taken seriously. And to this day, it's like, dude, we could have done that. And it would have looked a lot better. Not to disparage the guys who put the effect together at the end. I think it was the Scotex. It's those early days getting the Hollywood to not fear effects. We had to work really hard, and then suddenly everybody just went, oh, okay. And now the exact opposite has sort of happened, where they just think you can do anything. It's really promoted a lot of lazy filmmaking, actually. There'll be like a C-stand and a flag, or someone sitting in the back eating a donut. And they're like, we'll take it out later. It's like, no, just say, hey, move, but there's this, you just type it on the computer, just use one of these and make it go away. And a lot of people don't understand. So the discipline
kind of disappeared then.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you think, though, that your grounding in that physical world initially sort of stood you in good stead for the transition to computer graphics, because maybe you have a more discerning eye in terms of what the audience perceive as real?
Yeah, I definitely do. And I feel kind of privileged to have bridged that photochemical to digital world. When I started, it was all film, and everything was edited on a flatbed, and I got to watch the entire digital revolution happen. And now we're working at 8K and doing stuff with, we have one shot. The frames from one shot is bigger than the entire storage capacity of the company that I worked at when we first started this stuff. It's just been an amazing jump. But I was there for the rubber puppets and model work and, film rolling through a camera. So there's some things that's still way more difficult to do, or way more it's difficult or convincing to do. Fire, water, all that stuff, the natural stuff. You can do amazing stuff with simulations. And there's some stuff that I wouldn't want to try and attempt, where that you can do it. If you have a really large object falling into the ocean, send that to Scanline and let them do their magic water work on it, because that type of thing you can easily do. But, if you've got, like on The Mist, we had a guy who's using a blowtorch, torching this thing on a nest on a tree. I can hire a physics guy or a physical animation effects guy and have him work on that thing, and it'll take days and days and days using the most powerful machine in the company to do these simulations of the fire working, then give them notes and try another version, give them notes and try another version. Or I can just go get some chicken wire, wrap it in newspaper, slather it, spray it black, slather it with rubber cement, shoot it while I set it on fire. So that was the kind of stuff I did at Cafe all the time. It was just a more logical way to do it. With there's amazing physical stuff can be simulated, but the speed at which it can be turned around has never been fast enough or convincing enough for my taste. Not when I can just go shoot some elements. So I shot elements of fog, of water, of smoke, of steam, all kinds of stuff. I was constantly doing that. And every show was like, okay, well, what do we need for this? Or we'd be sitting in dailies and someone would say, well, how are we going to do that? It's like, let's set something on fire. I don't have a problem with that. I'll shoot it with a red camera. Now it's still digital.
Yeah.
I can hand it off.
Yeah.
But
it's good to have your feet in both camps, because you can always think of a solution. Because ultimately, time is money, right? So you need to get this thing done. And maybe the practical solution is the best. Maybe the computer is the best. But being able to have half your brain in one arena and half in the other must be really useful. And I'm sure has helped you be employed on many films, throughout your career. I mean, I looked through, your IMDb, and I look, and I see Spider-Man 2. I remember that was quite a big leap at the time with some of the effects in that. And then Sin City as well, Pan's Labyrinth. Is there a film that you worked on that you really felt a kind of kinship with the person helming it, the director, where you felt like you were kind of on a level with them and had that similar appreciation of both practical and digital effects?
Guillermo del Toro is definitely one of those guys. He's got a very practical mind for what really works for the shot and what just makes sense. And he's another geek. We were all just nerds working together, so he was definitely a standout. And Frank Darabont was always really practical with just make it happen. I kind of want it to look like this. Just make it happen. Whatever. And there's
putting his trust in you, yeah.
They're dictating this has got to be done this way. Like, why? We used to get inquiries about what software we're using. Like, why do you care? What does it matter? Soft image. It has to be soft image. But it later became SDI or whatever. We were using Lightwave. It's like, oh, that wasn't real software. But the better directors and creatives to work for didn't care how you got it, the means of the shot. Just as long as it looks good, as long as it tells the story.
Yeah, I hear that about Guillermo. I've heard interviews with him recently. I think there was one with Mark Maron I listened to recently where he was basically just talking about how his house is full of models and collectibles, and
yeah, he's a huge.
He gets people to build him stuff that's kind of screen accurate rather than spending all of his money on actual props that were in the movies. Do you own stuff like that? Oh, nice. That's good to hear. Do you own stuff like that yourself, like things from movies that you worked on, or do you go back recreating those things?
I make a lot of reproductions and stuff. There's things that I want to just, fun stuff I want to surround myself with. I've never actually bought like a prop or anything like that. I'll just make them. I'm constantly doing it. I've got a Stormtrooper blaster over there. I've got Han Solo's blaster up there. I've got a lightsaber right here. This is, as close as you can get. It's an actual Graflex 3-cell.
Yeah. Hard to get hold of these days.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I was looking on your...
Make stuff. So this is plastic.
Oh, the staff.
The headpiece to the staff of Raw. It's just,
yeah.
I made it.
The part, though.
I wanted to have
Yeah,
one,
you made
so
that.
Now I have it.
Where did you just from reference photos or?
Yeah, actually, that was started as a digital model that I modified because it wasn't quite right, and then I have 5 3D printers. I'm constantly making weird stuff, so I printed that in resin, and then the edging on that this wasn't in the model really. Yeah, so it's got again more super cool podcasts content while I show you stuff on camera, but the edge of it, if it'll focus. Is actually chain. So to get it to look right, you have to glue chain on the outside of it, and then you weather on top of that, and then it's painted with a chrome paint.
Yeah,
and then use clear yellows and oranges on top of that to get the gold cast, the bronze cast, and then weather a little bit. So it's got some washes on it and some oils. But
that's very cool.
But it doesn't weigh anything. So there's always in my mind, what if I make one out of metal?
It's crazy to think, isn't it? Like the original screen-used version of that would be hundreds of thousands of dollars, probably more these days, with some of those big collectors throwing in millions now. Yeah, probably made in a very similar way. I mean, obviously not 3D printed necessarily back then because that didn't exist, but, just done with a simple mold and painted. Yeah. And
I'm sure they were just sculpted as sand cast and cast in bronze or some other pot metal. Not terribly sophisticated.
But there is something, isn't there, about having like those reproductions in your hand that sort of connects you to those movies. Because ultimately, I see you, Tommy, very much as somebody in the industry, but also a fan of the films. I could see that from your Instagram, and we all just want to get closer to those movies that we love, and just making that stuff must be very cool. I mean, I've got a Stormtrooper helmet, and I've had a Graflex before. I sold it stupidly.
No.
But there is just something about having those things in your hand that connects you to those films.
I have always been absolutely fascinated with the film industry, and by now, I've been doing this since 1988. I should be completely over it, but anytime I get to go on set, love it. Anytime when we start talking about a new movie we're working on, love it. Seeing that first footage rolling through. Even like, I'll do an articulate matte. I'll just do some rotoscope, and watching that play back in motion for the first time, just the black and white matte that I've hand animated. I just think back to all those guys doing that on the actual big rotoscope machine. And I was absolutely fascinated with it back then. I still get a little giddy watching it now. I should be completely over it, but the 12-year-old in me, I'm a man-child.
Well, they say, don't they, if you can end up working in the field that you loved, or doing the things you love when you were sort of between the ages of 9 and 12, then you've really sort of found the dream life in many ways.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I also like your sense of humor, Tommy, on your Instagram page, seeing some of the things you created. Like one of my favorites was the forgotten comlink that you made in the Kenner packaging.
Right there.
Is up there behind you. Yeah.
This whole thing started with this. It's a droid part.
Oh, that.
So droids where he holds it up. This just popped into my head, kind of fully formed, and I went, "Oh, I should make that." So I started researching.
Just for people listening, this is the little ring kind of piece that the Stormtrooper holds up and says, "Look, sir, droids." And you've put it in the Kenner packaging with the Stormtrooper holding it up, and it's just in the bubble there with just
roll around ring. In there. Yep. It's called Droid Part.
Yeah,
I just wanted to have one. I thought it just popped in my head. I thought I'm just going to make that, but I made 10 of them. So that I could give some to my friends.
Yeah.
But the minute I posted it on Instagram, I suddenly got assaulted with people requesting it. So I was like, okay, well, based on the demand, I was okay. I'll make 100 of them. Yeah. And those sold in 3 days. I was like, oh my god. Okay, well, I'll make another 100 of them, and those sold out in like a week. So I've stopped making those particular ones, but only because I ran out of the cards. So I was having them made. And
are you making sure the card is the right thickness and it has the right gloss on it and all of that stuff. I'm sure you are. I can see just from the smile on your face.
Yeah, I've actually recently, the originals, the prototypes, I should say, I decided once that happened, I thought, well, I'll make another one. And that was what the Forgotten Comlink turned into. And, which is, the Stormtrooper Comlink that 3PO leaves on the table when they're hiding. So the scene where they're in a trash compactor.
Yeah.
3D printed, pretty simply. But if you look at it, this one's a little bit glossy, a little too glossy. I finally found a vendor that can make them how I like them.
Huh.
So this is one of the most recent ones. This is the Fanboy Tears. But you can see the gloss on that one is pretty accurate. So, amazing. And I found a vendor that will make these for me. That is,
and is there a backing that shows your other stuff on there, or is it just like a replica of the Collect All 12 or whatever?
Yeah, it's just a classic card back.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
Only difference is it's got my logo down there.
Your logo, yeah. Very cool. Yeah, I tried to knock up a few things years ago. I had this idea of making figures of crew members from the Star Wars movies. So I made a very rudimentary kind of Lorne Peterson from General Medine by making his hair a bit longer and painting him differently. I mean, I would totally buy those figures. If somebody was to make figures of all of the major crew members, I would definitely buy them.
There's a photo they were shooting on in Tunisia. There's a guy who's got wearing nothing but short shorts, like
pink shorts and a boom mic.
Yeah, that guy. I thought, that's a perfect action figure. I should make that.
Yeah,
I still may. I don't know if somebody else.
The bubble would have to extend off, wouldn't it? Like it'd have to be sort of an upside down L to accommodate the boom mic. But I've seen people
just have them in the figure and have it as a
like
pack in. The picture will show what it's supposed to be, but it'll just be on its own custom blister.
Yeah. True. Yeah. Yeah.
So
no,
I decided
I'd definitely buy those.
Since the first one was a prop, the second one turned into a prop. It's like, okay, well, I'll just continue doing that.
Yeah.
And that turned in. I decided to make a trilogy of the trilogy. So there's going to be 3 figures from each movie. And then I expanded on it a little bit. I've made 2 figures that are not from the movie so much. That was the George Lucas cash roll. And then the Fanboy Tears. Yeah. And those are they're super simple ones that just kind of popped in my head. And all of them were just made for me. I decided I want this. And sometimes it's a lot of work to make it happen. And then I'll make extras that I could just give to my friends, and then I'll sell a few of them to help cover the costs and fund the next one to make. So the hardest one was the needlessly complicated microphone.
Oh yeah, the Lando Calrissian Cloud City microphone. I advise all of you to leave, or whatever he says. Yeah, with that really weirdly complex.
Yeah, I mean, he goes up, he has a punch code in, and it pops out, and then he takes it off and starts talking into it. It's like every other sci-fi movie ever made from Star Trek on. They just go up on the panel on the wall and they push a button and talk. For some reason they had to do this, and I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna make that. I've got the whole line planned here. I'm just about to release the 3rd Empire one, right?
Right.
Yeah. The 3rd Empire one is gonna drop very, 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 very soon. Very soon.
Cool.
I would show you, but I'm not certain of my my turnaround time. But when we're done recording, I'll give you a preview of it.
Cool, that would be good. Where can people? What's your Instagram address, Tommy? Just so people can go and check your stuff out.
Nerds and Makers. I made it plural for some reason. But it's just me. I occasionally have some help from my family, but that's about it.
Yeah, it's like my Filmumentaries thing. It's just me. Like I talk about it's like it's a company, but it's just me with a little logo and doing interviews over the internet. I'm sure there's so much more we could talk about, but I think an hour is always kind of my target for each episode. But I'm sure if we stay in touch, it'd be good to hear from you again about some of your upcoming projects in the future. Definitely have you back on talking about those. But yeah,
happy to chat.
I think you've had an incredible career looking at it. There's been some cult classics in there. There's been some proper blockbusters. Is there one you
talked
about?
On the Barney movie,
Guillermo
there's always plenty of there to keep my feet on the ground.
Yeah. But you mentioned about Guillermo del Toro being the sort of director that you sort of felt a kinship with. But is there a particular movie where you just think, wow, we really broke the mold with that one, and it represented a leap in your industry?
I don't think any of them were any kind of paradigm shifts. There's a lot of work that is. I mean, like the movie that I'm most proud of is probably Pan's Labyrinth. I had a lot to do with every shot that's in that film. And when they were shooting it in Spain, the producer, the VFX producer and co-supervisor, and the VFX supervisor were off in Spain, and me and Akira were like the kind of the guys on the ground. We set up a whole pipeline. We had to do a tremendous amount of work just to kind of lay the groundwork to be able to do that movie. And then when it came back, I was compositing supervisor. That's when we actually started the film. And when it came out, I mean, I knew we were doing something pretty cool when we were working on it. And just, working with GDT was great. But when it came out, it was like, oh my God, we have worked on a masterpiece. We had all of us, and I actually sent a mail out to the crew, the entire company, when I got back from the premiere. I was like, listen, people, you're only going to do this a few times, maybe only once in your entire career. That was it. We just did it. That was, and it was super hard. It was really hard. The Mist also was really, really difficult to kind of pull off. But, we just really stuck to it and finally, got everything out on it. But some of those shots were just absolute killers. But we're real proud of what we did on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Pan's Labyrinth is one of those films that's really stood the test of time and will continue to stand the test of time. It just always looks amazing and fresh whenever I revisit it. Like if a few years pass and I go back to it, I'm always kind of blown away by what you and the crew managed to achieve.
Yeah,
it really does feel like something special.
Very, very proud of what we did. Still am. I'll stand by that movie. It is a masterpiece. It's amazing.
Yeah. What are you working on at the moment, or what's the latest project you've worked on?
Can't talk about the current thing, but the last thing that's out now would be Dune Prophecy, which the last episode actually just premiered last week, and that was a lot of fun. We ended up working on that as they called us the in-house effects house. So we kind of did like a total mixed bag of stuff. Nothing super sexy, all the ships and all that cool stuff that the show's known for. We didn't do any of that. We're just kind of the nuts and bolts, making things work. I mean, probably the only kind of cool thing I did, there was like this little lock that she puts on the wall that has like little animated parts that come on it. And all they had was a static prop, so I made it move around a little bit, and with the little glow we put on it. Everything else, I'd have to describe it on the shot-by-shot basis. Oh, we did that thing in the corner, or that's gone, or this is actually 2 different takes. So it's really unsexy work, but it's all very important stuff. So that's cool. So my name's on every episode. It's like, oh, okay.
That's cool. And you sent me this Word document of your book. Do you have proper plans to get it out there, get it released?
I don't know. I
published?
dabble with it. Every once in a while, it's something to pop in my head. It's an old story, or I decide I'm just going to write down something, an interesting thing that happened. The whole thing started because I had stories to tell people. We were all hanging out at lunch and stuff. I could talk about, the time we almost got blown up on the boneyard, that type of thing. It it grew and grew and grew, and now it's like, like novellas. I don't know what the cutoff is. It's like 80,000 plus words. It's like, okay, this is actually a proper book now. Yeah. But I don't know if I have the confidence to hire an editor, and even if I self-publish. But I've always kind of, maybe someday I'm going to do it. So I've been collecting old photos and putting them into an archive, and it's got a place where it may happen someday, but there's no immediate plans to. If there's any publishers out there who want to take a chance on some nerd musings about a film industry,
I definitely think there's an audience for it. Yeah, I definitely think there's an audience for it. you called it Memoirs of a Lifelong Geek. I think that's a perfect title because, you know, as I said to you before earlier on, you're one of us, you know, but you just happen to be in the industry as well.
Yeah, I kind of I should have like 8 feet for how many legs I've got into all these different things, like prop making and manufacturing, and, you know, made my own coins. I've done all this really, really wacky stuff, and I really find it hard to classify what I am. I just say I'm a visual effects artist and maker of things. That kind of encapsulates it, but even that, it's like, but none of it should be taken very seriously because I don't take myself very seriously. A lot of it's very, very dumb.
Yeah, but I when I speak to people who create to the extent that you do, it feels to me like it's, you know, it's part hobby, it's part profession, it's part meditation, it's mental health. It's like you are driven to create, you have to create, and it's great that you've got your feet in all of those camps because, you know, we get to benefit from it.
Sometimes it's just for me. My wife gave me a pair of scissors. I needed a case for it, so I got my leather out and I made a case. And one day, I have a sheath for it. And that's the kind of thing. It's like I might put a picture on Instagram, but I make stuff daily. Today only, I've worked on 3 different projects. I have to.
Yeah, I wish I had the same abilities as you. I appreciate your time today, Tommy. It's been really nice to talk to you, and I hope that book comes out sometime in the future, not too distant future.
Oh, I appreciate it. I'm amazed you even read it.
No, I did. I enjoyed it. It was great.
Cool.
I hope you enjoyed my chat with Tommy Williamson. I love speaking to people like Tommy who not only work in the industry but still have that pure fans' enthusiasm for the movies that we all grew up with. His passion for creating, whether it's on the blockbuster films that he's worked on or at his workbench making prop replicas, and you would have heard in our conversation, you know, he's made these wonderful kind of Star Wars Kenner carded alternate reality kind of collectibles, which he does sell. So if you follow him on Instagram, Nerds and Makers on Instagram. But all of that really comes across so well from Tommy and that enthusiasm. And I have no doubt that I'll have him back on the podcast in the future at some point. If you'd like to see more of Tommy's work, you can find him, as I said, on Instagram at Nerds and Makers. It's well worth a follow. Some of his great builds they're genuinely brilliant. They make me chuckle. And if you want to support this podcast and help me keep these conversations coming, please do head over to patreon.com/Jamie Benning, JamieBenning. Every bit of support really does make a difference. Once I've spent my money for, you know, editing software, the hosting, the software I use to transcribe, there isn't really much left over, and I need to find a way to justify doing this. Otherwise, it's going to stop, and that would be sad for me, and hopefully sad for you. Also, don't forget to check out the Filmumentaries YouTube channel, where you'll find lots of extra videos and behind-the-scenes clips. Thanks, as always, for listening, and I'll be back soon with another episode of the Filmumentaries Podcast.
We are getting way